Welcome to The Digital Patient, where we discuss the latest advancements in digital patient engagement and share stories from the front lines. I'm your host, Alan Sardana, and with me as always is Seamless MD CEO, Dr. Joshua Liu. Today we're joined by our very special guest, Suja Chandra. Suja served as Senior Executive Vice President, Chief Digital and Information Officer at CommonSpirit Health. Previously, she has been a member of executive leadership teams, Global Chief of Digital and Tech at large companies including Walmart, Kimberly-Clark, Nestle, and the Timberland Company. Suja served as the board member on the boards of public companies, American Eagle Outfitters, Fortune 15 company Cardinal Health, as well as on the boards of private companies, Bloom Global Technologies and Agendia. Suja is the founder and a board member of T200, Women CXOs in Tech, a nonprofit focused on developing women in tech. Suja, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You've led the most fascinating career in tech. I'm really curious to start the conversation. I'd love to understand more about your journey. And in particular, I'm curious what drew you initially to engineering and technology in the first place?
Thank you. That's a great question. I'll come back to the last part of the question in a minute. Alan, I would say my journey has been, I started as a software engineer, but pretty soon moved into business technology roles and business operations roles. And I've been in retail and consumer-centered industries for the most part. So really acutely aware of customer needs, consumer needs, and providing access, convenience, transparency of pricing has been part of the industries that I have been with, and enabling both internal processes for efficiency and productivity, as well as external customer enablement, new revenue sources from new customer segments, new geographical expansion, new product innovation. So this has been my journey across the various companies and predominantly consumer-based, but retail and consumer goods and healthcare industries. Now, to your question, why I chose, I guess it was certainly there's a lot of family influence. Asian cultures have a lot of family influence in what we study and where we go. And also it was also opportunities are plentiful in engineering and medicine. So really it was more opportunistically driven. But then I guess I love the concept of problem solving. Engineering is about problem solving. So you build a passion and you grow into it and you scale into it.
Suja, like for many years, you were a leader in more consumer businesses, Walmart and so forth. And then in 2019, you made the leap to healthcare when you became the Chief Digital and Information Officer at a very large system, CommonSpirit Health. What was the story around why you decided to move into healthcare?
I've had my own share of healthcare ailments in my life, and I don't want to go into the details of it, but my younger age was I've had near fatal experiences of ailments, and I had an okay access to care, definitely not the best. My mother passed away very early on, and I've seen a lot of situations. So there comes a point in our lives that we want to be more purpose-driven, purpose-focused. So my transition into healthcare, and I have done healthcare before as well in certain ways and forms, but the primary focus on a provider side healthcare came out of that purpose-driven focus. But I will also tell you there is an enormous set of trends that are happening all around us. The consumerization of all industries, including healthcare. The wearables market is going to go, 20% CAGR by 2026. The therapeutics market is forecasted with a CAGR of 31% in the next 8 years, so by 2030. Retail clinics, a number of retail clinics are exploding, and the retail coming into big tech, and various care delivery formats coming into lower acuity care. That change is well underway. And the digital health funding reached a big crescendo in 2021, right? 17.6 billion just in 2022 until Q2. So there are some big numbers that are happening. The remote patient monitoring, the whole health at home remote patient monitoring, and you couple that with patient self-management and the wearables. The personalized medicine, precision medicine, I'm on the board of Agendia, which is about personalized molecular genomics-based diagnostics and therapeutics. And that also means that data and AI is everywhere. So are they meaningfully applying data and AI and the technologies associated with it? Preventative care, that's a major theme and a major topic. And of course, the mother of all changes, which has been going on for a couple of decades, probably longer now, is value-based care in the United States. And value-based care has so many components of it underneath that is tech, data, digital enabled, and moving from the fee-for-service to risk-based management. So multiple trends are happening. And the human centricity of those trends is crucial. And sort of those trends were at that time they were quite there, quite present. And I wanted to be part of the journey, bring in some of my learnings from the other industry and an impact and influence healthcare, and digital health.
One trend I want to unpack a bit more is what we're seeing from like big tech. When we talked to digital health leaders at health systems maybe 3 years ago, everyone was saying, hey, we need to be more like Amazon and be consumer centric and have a great consumer digital experience. And now with the acquisition by Amazon of One Medical, health system leaders are now saying, oh, actually, is Amazon now a competitor? So the story around should be more like Amazon or not has kind of changed. What are you seeing with big tech lately? And what do you think that means for the future of care delivery?
Yeah, big tech plays in different ways, right? So you've got, on the one hand, you've got Google offering the cloud, right? And a very robust offering. And they've got the AI startup on drug discovery. And then, of course, Google GCP is a great hyperscaler platform with a very heavy focus on healthcare. And then, of course, Microsoft plays a similar role, and Nuanced, they acquired Nuance. And then you've got Amazon with a direct mode of a care delivery play. And it's sort of what, the third iteration, fourth iteration, but Amazon will crack the code at some point. Certainly it'll continue. And also, in addition to that, pay special attention to United, Optum, CVS, Aetna, right? And Walgreens and Walmart side, and pay attention in Humana, right? So all of these companies, relevance. So the pay biders are also big, major areas of focus. So I wouldn't just focus on big tech. I will focus on the broader umbrella. Of course, the providers, and that space is coming together, right? The payers are becoming providers are becoming payers. The pay bidder access is happening. Just on the consumerization, I think the trend is going towards consumerization. I will tell you the one thing that I am watching, and everybody's trying, right? So it's first a mindset change, then it's a business model change, then it's a technology change, not the other way around. Technology may inspire it a little bit more. In other industries, particularly in retail and consumer industries, in a way, there came a point, there was always the Amazon factor. There is always the omni-channel retailers doing well and doing more advanced and progressing advanced and capturing market share. But the consumer at some point tipped over, and the consumers took the industry forward and almost expected certain things, expected the convenience of omni-channel, expect even today, they expect two-day delivery, and retailers that don't give two-day delivery are somewhat at a disadvantage, and they expect no delivery costs. They expect being able to return at no fees, right? So there was an element of consumerization that happened, and then the radical price transparency, and they voted with their traffic, with their keyboard traffic or their foot traffic. If that was not there, they walked away. That entirely hasn't happened simply because the payers are the ones who are paying. So literally somebody's getting the care, the payers are paying, but I wouldn't write it off. But coming to the topic of consumerization is entirely about experiences. So that's why when anyone, payers, providers, providers, anyone are designing capabilities, it is with the human in mind. And the human in this case, as we spoke about just prior, would be definitely the patient, and then also the provider. And it's the ecosystem of everybody that is coming together to care for the patient. So I'll tell you a couple of simple stories, and these are sort of more or less real stories, but you will know someone, you will resonate. Think of Mrs. Johnson. She's about 80 years old. She has a medical history. She has a lot of medical history. She is a fictitious patient, but she could be someone who lives in your neighborhood. But she's had heart diseases. She's a diabetic. She's 80. She's a Medicare patient. She has a repeat hospital visits, right? She goes in and out. She gets treated. She goes to emergency room, and she comes back every couple of weeks. So it's a situation that's not that great for her. This is where she has been traditionally. But then in the future, where we are going is giving her a better continuum of care, right? It's not that every time she goes back from ER that she's just dropped at home. She just goes home and there is nobody to care, but there is a continuum of a series of capabilities and a care team that is there to help her with some remote patient monitoring capabilities. She's not entirely prepared to use those digital capabilities. So the devices are big. The iPad is set to big fonts. They're very simple. It's one button click kind of capabilities. And her medication history is well known. It's not that everybody has to figure out what is her past medication history and which medicines conflict with each other. So think of more of a seamless flow of her information between the ER room, her primary care physician, her cardiologist, her diabetic physician. So all of that is all brought together, and there is a continuum and care providing capabilities, caregiving capabilities that give her support at home as well. That's the story of Mrs. Johnson. And take another example on the other end, which is Miss Kim Lee. She's 35 years old. She's got 2 young kids. She's juggling multiple balls. She's in airports, organizing or scheduling a visit for her child online. And the person who's taking care of the children, they are taking the children to get their latest vaccines, so they're brought back, right? And she's able to track all of that electronically, and she herself, and her mother has cancer, had breast cancer, and she's following up with the mother's oncologist, and she's navigating and juggling all of this while managing her own career and her own health. And all of these, she's using digital devices very fluently. And so we got to cater to both ends of the spectrum and make the full body care, the whole body care ready and available. The physical experience inside the acute or ambulatory facilities, as well as the digital experiences and everything in between, seamless for them while protecting their data. So that's sort of something we kept in mind quite a bit, is that anything we do is about the human ultimately. And likewise, internally, the providers are able to interact with all of that.
Suja, I think those are some really great things to envision about how we digitize the patient journey. So wonderful examples. I wanted to ask you on that. You mentioned earlier that we have to start with the change in mindset, then business model, and the technology change happens. And I think one of the questions we hear a lot about from providers is, well, unless the value-based care model accelerates or there's some other change in incentives or the business model, it's hard to get providers adopting new technology to improve patient outcomes. I'm curious, any thoughts about what has to change in either the business models or in incentives in the next couple of years to actually get more adoption of these types of digital experiences that we're talking about?
So I'll come at it from another angle, right? So I'll talk about artificial intelligence. Healthcare is a corpus of data. There is data everywhere. I mean, every industry claims that, but I would say healthcare is even more of a science-oriented faculty. It's a science-oriented element. So therefore, there is data everywhere. I'm talking about the handwritten notes. I'm talking about every piece. You walk into an intensive care unit, the number of equipment there and the blinking lights and the numbers that are tweaking. So there is all of that and connected to your health record system. It's a corpus of data on all the way from the drug discovery. If you start all the way to value-based care and closing the healthcare loop, so from that whole system and the players, it's data. But the amount of interoperability is very limited. The amount of machine learning or complex or advanced techniques applied to tame this complexity of data, that's also limited. And also the data models vary. So there's a lot of complexities. So add to this one specific use case of infusing AI into radiology. Radiology is such an important topic. And in the US, I met with some radiologists last week at the RSNA, which is a large convention. One radiologist told me that it's based on the number of images per exam. The number of exams is increasing, number of images per exam. So that's across radiology, MRI, CT, all the different modalities. When you look at the total number of exams and images done in the country, by the number of radiologists that are available in the country, which is 31,000. Roughly each radiologist has to review and assess and read about 3 million images per year. That is impossible for a human being to look at 3 million images per year. So where 3, 4, 5 years back, when the radiologists perceived AI as potentially as, I don't understand AI, I don't know what is the explainability of this, to when today, now they see it as a meaningful assistant. Now the technology is still maturing. I would say if it was a Gartner curve, I would still put it at the left of the curve. But my point is that the mindset shift is happening. It was absolutely endearing to watch and see and listen to radiologists speak to it. In RSNA, there was such AI 3 years back was a corner. This time AI was almost like half a hall was AI, the number of topics on artificial intelligence. And this is at a radiologist convention. So between productivity, between cost and other challenges, between just the volume, the consistency of protocol required, and just also really, it's about the patient. So when you keep the patient centricity in mind, and by no means it's perfect. So the mindset shift is happening. It'll be a slow journey. And I've seen it in other industries, and there's always a tipping point that an industry reaches or a group of people reaches. But also data and data driven, it's a very, like I said, they are very science oriented, they're very standards and protocols oriented. So the more the comparative studies, whether it's experience-based treatments, concordance of virtual care versus in-person care, AI, and once again, comparison studies, not just in one pocket, just from big tech, but it's done by multiple AMCs. It is done in multiple provider facilities. The more that groundswell happens, I'm absolutely certain they will embrace it. Maybe I'm too simplistic in my thinking. Maybe I'm too simplistic, but I'm positive.
I love that. And maybe on top of AI, I mean, as you're seeing in the market, especially this year, staff shortages, rising nursing costs, and a lot of health systems are looking for ways to drive operational efficiencies. And so I'm curious, like what trends you're seeing when it comes to using AI to drive operational efficiencies and tackle some of these staffing issues right now.
Yeah, no, I will. Let's talk about AI in its broad form, right?
Mm.
When I look at AI in healthcare, drug discovery is a major topic. When I look at the funnel complexity and the iterations that are necessary to identify, you get into a hypothesis of focusing on certain molecules and compounds to treat certain diseases or conditions. You typically start with 10,000, 5,000 to 10,000 compounds. Then through an iterative process, the funnel goes down and down and down until you do have a product that's ready for clinical trial. Then there is a whole iteration around clinical trial. So think of that funnel that big and that broad, and access to new biology, improvements and reach of novel chemistry, the success rates of matching those compounds, molecules with conditions. So all of that have a big spot with a big focus with AI. I'm on the board of Agendia, which is a precision medicine breast cancer oncology company. So we take the core biopsy of the tissue, and then it comes to our labs and we review it for molecular genomics and we provide certain diagnostics and recommendations. Now think of the same thing digitized, because that what is on the slide is an image. And so even if it is not the final recommendation, if at the point of when the pathologist, when it's the surgeon takes the biopsy, it goes on a slide, that image gets uploaded, it goes on the cloud, that is a comparison, and that is a first 30-minute version. While you can still do a double on other things, you can go back and do a proper test and tease it out. So that is an AI algorithm, like I talked about. It's also pathology, radiology, cardiology, all these image-based mapping and image-based diagnostics are a major focus in general. Once again, it's a concordance. How do we get to the concordance game? Now, in terms of patient care, this is one common use case, and many of us have done this very successfully, is the sepsis prediction. So a patient comes in and sepsis and the escalations of sepsis and preventability of that, which is you take the data signals from the health record, the vitals, your temperature, your heart rate, your vitals are feeding in, and then plus the notes, the physician's notes, the nursing notes, and the NLP algorithms that go on top of it. And across all of those signals, being able to predict a sepsis alert and give a degree of this is how you look at, and physicians being able to trust and use. And of course, they will apply their judgment. At this point, I still believe AI is an assistive AI. It is a supportive enablement and supportive capability, and physician and clinician ultimately is the one who is making the decision. So that is another common use case. Now, in terms of in terms of operational and other value-based care, and definitely patient is at the center of this, is the hospital readmission. So very similarly, based on a lot of signals about the patient, this visit, past visit, medications given, and various other conditions, you're able to predict whether there will be a repeat visit and what interventions can and must be done now is a use case that's used in value-based care. So the point is, AI has very much, it's scaling, it is happening. Longitudinal records being built through interoperability or other mechanisms, and being able to apply AI techniques. But once again, AI has to be very clinically, the clinical data set, the clinical AI models will be very much clinically led. But like I shared, there is administrative use cases, there is operational use cases, coding of rev cycle algorithms, rev cycle codes, and being able to manage that operational capability with AI as an infused capability, as well as personalization. You have to be careful because not all patient data can be applied into these algorithms like you would do in a regular consumer world. But being able to use patient information to personalize the journey that they come with and make those offerings more personalized. So it's a broad topic and it's still in its early stages, but lots of work happening in the industry.
I think it's so fascinating, Suja, how you were saying it started in the corner of this conference and now this year it's taking up half this space. I think it really shows the potential that it could have in all these areas. One message that I've heard you share in the past is this idea around 70-20-10 philosophy, where an organization should have 70% of their focus on operational excellence, 20% on transformation, and 10% on moonshots. I'm curious, what do you do to encourage healthcare systems that are traditionally risk adverse to still take these moonshots?
They are doing it in what is relevant and contextual for their own companies, right? So there is a lot of partnerships that are happening, a lot of partnerships that you would typically think that don't happen. I was talking to someone I know who is running a large health system, and he has built a partnership with another payvider in the state. It's one provider and a payvider. So you would think, why would they co-opt with each other? But it's the interest of the patient. And they're doing value-based care offerings, shared capabilities. But there is also the 70-30-10 is a general rule, but it's very contextually driven by the current situation in the US. Certainly there is a triple dipping happening and hospital beds are almost at peak COVID level at this moment, because it's not just COVID, it's everything together. So that takes a lot of the focus, but also cost has taken a lot of focus for most health systems. So, but within the context, I do believe that people are really trying to innovate and people are really trying to engage. So one of the frameworks we have applied is in terms of embracing digital health is we built what we call the four-clover leaf strategy. One is digital patient engagement. So this is where when I looked at your podcast, you don't call it digital health. Your podcast is called Digital Patient Podcast, which is a nice play because it is ultimately about the patient. Then there's the virtual health offerings. So a series of virtual health capabilities across the care continuum, pre-visit, ambulatory visit, acute, post-acute. So the continuum, digital therapeutics integrations, there's a ton of digital therapeutics that's scaling up. And I don't think providers need to rebuild or recreate any of those. Those are lots and lots of partnerships, to your point. It's a lot of integrations. It's integrating not just the technologies, but more importantly, the workflow. And then most importantly, care provider experiences. Ultimately, the care provider should be able to work on that and deliver. So we sort of framed some of our approaches into those four buckets, and then we worked in detail across each one of those.
No, I love that. It's such a concrete way to think about how a health system should really be focused on digital in the future. I'm curious to get your take on how you look at value in healthcare. How should we be thinking about value from your perspective?
Yeah, it is ultimately about value. And I'm glad that you asked a question. So in a value-based care context, there is certainly that value, which is better outcome at lower cost. That's sort of like the precise definition of value in that context. But we have measured value across four variables. One is we've measured value as quality and safety. We've prioritized patient quality and safety as number one. So whatever we do, changes, status quo, whatever we do, transform, moonshots, quality and safety has to be paramount. And along with safety and effectiveness of the treatment of the service and the care provided. The second is access, right? It cannot be great quality and safety, but it's not equitably accessible, then it compromises everything. So the ease of access to the care, and here is where digital has to pay very specific attention to digital inequities. But digital could also be applied to offering more equity in certain contexts if you really play it appropriately. So the second is access. The third is cost. The cost and the transparency of price, right? So this is something that the industry is still working through. This was one of the regulated requirements, right? So that the regulation is out there. But fully embracing, and direct-to-consumer companies, direct-to-consumer healthcare companies are big on this, right? So you have a full a la carte of costs. So the cost and transparency of cost, that's a third one. And as a result of all of these engagement, we did all this great, but then our own employees, they're burnt out or they're not thriving in that environment. They are not practicing at the top of their license. So then we lost it. Likewise, we did all of this, but the patient didn't like it, right? So it's both side engagement. It's engagement on the patient side, NPS scores, whatever, what have you, or as well as engagement on the provider in the clinical context, non-clinical administrators, operators. So that's what we do. And for us, the value creation certainly was about the framework that I shared, but it was also building internal capabilities. We framed it as shore the core and build and scale the edge. So it's about embracing the cloud experience capabilities, core platforms, so common data sets, common health record systems, not just systems, but also protocols and workflows within the systems, data models. And then investing in identity management. That's a common issue you hear is that and the radiologists were telling me as well, each radiology system has a different user ID and password, and they have to reset it and they forget it's like the password thing, which has to be managed, right? And from a physician, from a provider perspective, or in general. And then amplifying Internet of Things, AI, ML, the API, so everything we spoke. And most importantly, last but not the least at all, is focusing on the human aspect. So talent transformation. Is the organization ready to embrace at-large organization, ready to embrace digital? It's seamlessly working. Now they've got the coolest gadget, but the Wi-Fi is not working. That isn't helping anyone. So giving them the tools and techniques, and it's a mindset as well. Digital is as much as a mindset and the metrics orientation. So that, and as well as the transforming organizations, the collective whole company fight of people coming together and working to deliver on a massive, on a transformative effort.
I really love that framework for how to think about value. That's such a comprehensive way to look at it and make sure that we don't miss anything critical to get value out of these digital health solutions going forward. Now, getting to that future that's digitally enabled is not easy. Suja, I'm curious, like, what are the major challenges you see us having to overcome to get to this future we all want in healthcare?
So the ecosystem has to come together and play. It's an ecosystem. It's not a single category of people. It's not just the providers. It's not just the payers. At least in the US, it's like so many different organizations that have to come together, including the government and the regulators. So the ecosystem working through the differences, focusing on patient and putting the patient at the center of what needs to be done. I also worry that when venture capital or when certain investments are made, I don't want that to be done at growth at all costs and forgetting patient centricity. If we mean patient centricity, we need to mean patient centricity. It cannot be just growth at all costs and forget that. I also worry a little bit about disproportionate innovation. So there is an imbalance, and I'll give you an example. Fundamentally, the payment models have to be addressed. And I'm not talking just value-based care, right? So one of the things that changed consumer industries was that the consumer paid and the consumer received the goods and services. Right. So that was one thing. And we didn't even think about that at that time. But when you really come into this industry, payments, buy now, pay later kind of options, credit options, other collection options. So there's in general, there are so many other options. The good news is most patients don't pay for their own care, at least a big part of their own care. But it has to be distributed, sort of more consistent innovation. I would worry about the digital divide. We touched on it. Human capital, they are burnt out. People are burnt out, especially in healthcare. People are really burnt out. So I worry that the human capital, the shortage that is coming of physicians, nurses, and all categories, human capital. I think we also need to be very careful about some of the cybersecurity events, privacy. Ultimately, what happens there is people lose trust. It's about trust. So we have to continue to maintain the human trust. And in that process, we also have to make sure that the systems are secure, the privacy regulations are respected, and the rule of the law, the letter of the law is respected and achieved. And in some ways, I would say regulation has been a momentum, has been a tailwind in healthcare, and that momentum needs to continue. The virtual care, cross-border virtual care, the cross-state approving that was crucial in the days of COVID, and that has continued, and the payment parity. So there are things like that. Regulatory momentum has to continue, and software as a medical device. I saw there were 400 AI algorithms approved as software as medical device in that radiology, cardiology, pathology universe. So the regulatory, so all the three-letter acronyms working towards the more continued momentum. And I looked at last year's either it's 2021 or 2022 NHS, the National health services in the UK, their strategy document, the number of times, if you just do a word search on digital, the number of times the word digital health was in that document was enormous. This is the national health body saying it. Now, yes, when you read through it, yes, you may agree or not agree with some subcomponents, but the focus. So momentum, regulatory and continued momentum from government. So those are some of the barriers, risks, and headwinds that we need to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Suja, just being mindful of your time, we like to end the podcast with a fast five lightning round, 5 questions to get to know you better for our audience. The first question that we have, Suja, is what is your favorite book or book you've gifted the most?
Oh my God, this is such a complex one. I've been a voracious reader, but off late, I've not been consistent in taking a book and reading it from beginning to end. The whole bite-sized consumption has spoiled me. But I would say some of the recent books, I've trained myself to now read an author, pick an author and read all their books, right? Like Marshall Goldsmith. And a few I've done already, Walter Isaacson. So I think this is a Marshall Goldsmith book on Mojo. I think that one is the one I'm going to call out. Don't ask me the temporal nature of that, but it's the most recent, is the most on top of my mind.
Amazing. Question 2, who is a person either dead or alive you'd love to meet?
Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She just
nice.
inspires me. She's just so calm, and yet the amount of impact she made to women. And she's just, if you didn't know she was Ruth, she probably would get overlooked. But just so the calmness with which she has done such big changes for women, I would love to meet her.
Absolutely. Question 3, would you rather have super strength, super speed, or the ability to read people's minds?
Oh my God, what such hypothetical questions, but I guess the ability to read people's minds is what is the most practical. It's the most practical, and it's the what, oh my goodness, I wish I know exactly what you're thinking. Maybe not.
Yeah, maybe not. No, I love it. Question 4, what is something in healthcare you believe that others might find insane?
I think we can learn a ton from how the world approached COVID. Now, yes, it was imperfect. It was anything but perfect. But there was something unique, at least in my lifetime, where a collective global world, all the way from the virus being identified, the genomic pattern of that getting relayed around the world. So every lab could start testing for the COVID-19 virus. The protocols, the trying out different medications were available, the warp speed finding of the vaccines, the mRNA, the whole mRNA-based vaccines, the vaccine administration, the cross-border exports, imports of vaccines, the way in which, yeah, it wasn't perfect, but the new variants that kept coming, it wasn't perfectly communicated, but it just felt like we all fought it together a bit. We all commiserated together for sure. But my hope is we do more of that. My dream and vision is also, this is my personal commitment from my own personal history. I want to impact the life of 1 billion women. I want to do that globally in a public health context. And I do think we take some of the lessons from COVID, fighting COVID, into truly improving healthcare for women around the world, especially in emerging countries where it's far from basic.
I love it. Last question that we have, Suja, this is more of a pandemic lockdown related question. What is one hobby or activity that you got into since the beginning of the pandemic?
I got into many things, but I'll tell you the one fundamental change that I have made is a mindset shift. The mindset shift of life is short. It just sort of hit me. I remember the knot in my stomach pit in February 2020 on what is this that's coming at us. Just the fear I went through, just imagining some of the worst movies in my own. I'll never forget that feeling. Life is short, and just a number of unnecessary deaths. And also couple that with the amount of resilience that we all went through and we bounced back. I just, I guess a lot more appreciation of life, a lot more appreciation of the collective resilience and leaning and supporting people. And I used to be a bit of a stoic. So opening up the vulnerability and just more of the empath and just being acknowledging a lot more of my own emotions, because I was trained in the world of, no, your emotions, you have to sort of put it in a box in a corner. but being just more open and vulnerable to that, and the open cognizance of that, the neurological health is such an important thing, both around in the communities I'm in, for my own family, for my communities, for the people that work for me, the people that work with me, just in general for humanity. I think the COVID experience changed not just me in that aspect, but many people.
Mhm. Yeah, very profound. I love that. Well, awesome. Suja, thank you so much for coming on the show today. You can find Suja on Twitter at Suja Chandra. That's SUJACHANDRA. And that's a wrap for this episode of The Digital Patient, hosted by Seamless MD. You can follow us on Twitter at SeamlessMD. If you like the podcast and you want to learn more, visit www.seamless.md. Suja, again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Josh. Keep doing the
Thanks,
great
Suja.
work. I appreciate it.
Likewise.